Hey everyone, it's Joe Glines here in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, and Jackie here from Copenhagen, Denmark.
And today in our short talk on AutoHotkey, we were going to actually kind of talk through of when and why would someone use AutoHotkey over AutoIt, and also flip it, when would you use AutoIt over AutoHotkey? We actually have and maybe I can try to remember to link to it in the the video, but we had a really good video, Jackie. We did a podcast. Well, it was one of the early ones talking about the history of AutoIt, right?
Yeah,
Of the different what do
yeah,
you call them?
AutoIt and AutoHotkey
Works.
actually, right?
Yes,
Or-
yeah, and that's actually kind of where I was coming from. Is like, you know what, they overlap a lot, right? In their functionality, it's not necessarily of a which one would you use for a given goal. It's more about who you are, kind of, is probably the decision process, right? Of how advanced of a programmer you are, possibly.
Yeah, not because I have much insight into all of what AutoIt is, but I did look at both very early on and kind of had the same thought, which one is the correct one to choose. And I'd already chosen AutoHotkey because I from my Google search, that one was the one that had the code that was exactly what I needed,
Mm-hmm.
presented first. But when doing other things over maybe the course of the first year, when just Googling for it, AutoIt came up from time to time, and from other people talking about both. Um, I'd say AutoHotkey seems to be, back in the day, there was a lot of talk about the community between the two, where the AutoHotkey community was more open and friendly and forthcoming, whereas the AutoIt community was more, they expected you to know a bit more about coding,
Oh boy.
being closerly or having a feeling of being closer related to normal programmers, where AutoHotkey has always had this um, big influx of new users, and the forums has always been willing to accommodate new
But
users.
to clarify, when you say new users, you mean like noobs and they're not programmers, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that AutoIt has probably had about the same amount of new users, but the community and the way that people were greeted was, at least, it felt differently.
Mm-hmm.
Just from reading the AutoIt forum and reading the AutoHotkey forum, not because everybody was always nice and overly willing to do code for people and stuff like that, but the emphasis seemed to be, oh, you're new. I was recently new, and I'm ready to help you because I think I understand where you're coming from. Where with AutoIt, it seemed like most of the voices were um, more, how it could almost be said in a way where in AutoIt you have this strongly typed language, where with AutoHotkey it's more softly typed, and it seemed to be kind of the same with the communities.
That's a great way
Well,
to look at it. I love it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Other than just saying that the people at AutoIt are dicks, right? Which because you look at how they, like, if an AutoHotkey, you often see like, hey, I'd like some help. I'd like to click a button. I'd like to move a mouse and click a button, like, which has been asked 8 million times, and people generally, they'll say, hey, why don't you first Google it? But this is how you do it, right? In
yeah,
AutoIt, they'll slam you and don't answer your question at all, or even give you any advice, right? They're just like,
yeah,
do your homework. They're much more rude about it, and that's the way. I think that's an honest representation. I think they would agree with that, right? Which is, they're just. I like the analogy, like they're a little, not harder, but yeah, more, yeah, not as soft, not as easy. Yeah, it's a good way to express it.
Yeah, it is a good way of putting it, because that is at least the feeling you get. And of course, I'm biased because I'm using AutoHotkey, and someone from the AutoHit community would probably feel some kind of weirdness with using the AutoHotkey form, because the, the the way people speak to each other are just different. And it might also be with AutoIt being closed source and AutoHotkey being open source, where you have some very, very strictly defined roles in the AutoIt community, at least more so than in the AutoHotkey community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for a long time, the AutoHotkey community was kind of trying to catch up to the AutoIt community, and therefore being this fork of the original, or at least an earlier version of AutoIt, made it so like AutoHotkey needed to kind of put itself apart, or
yeah,
and by that also having to try and distinguish itself from the AutoIt code and forums and community. And I think most of the people that use AutoHotkey or are old-time users of AutoHotkey, it seems that most of them are self-taught. Whereas I'm unsure if the same amount or percentage of people that use AutoIt is the same way. It seemed as if at least maybe, I don't know, 8-10 years ago or something like that, AutoIt was kind of accepted like Bash, where if you were kind of a IT supporter or something, it was okay to use AutoIt for small automation tasks. Whereas AutoHotkey has had a hard time of getting to that point. And some of that has probably also been because the AutoHotkey community has allowed game automation, at least to a bigger extent than AutoIt has done. And that has, of course, given us a niche in the market of being those that allow for that. And some feel that's very bad, and others think that's fine. I'm like, if we didn't have people coming in from that, which kind of people would we then have? Okay, then people like, we have a lot of people only using it for work. Yeah, but how many of them found AutoHotkey for work-related stuff?
Well, I think it gets back to, I was going to bring it up earlier when you said one of the reasons why you went with AutoHotkey was it happened to have the exact thing you were looking for, the code, piece that you needed at the time. And that was one of the big reasons why you stuck with AutoHotkey over AutoIt, right? And how it's kind of interesting because it's really a shame they don't have an independent source out there saying, hey, if you're looking for doing something like this and considering with AutoHotkey and AutoIt, here is kind of how you might want to make your decision, because people might struggle for a while with AutoIt if you're not a programmer, right? It's much tougher to pick up, in my opinion, compared to AutoHotkey. And so it and yet people might be trying it, and then they have programmers looking at AutoHotkey and they're get complaining about this and that. It's like, you go use AutoIt, right? If it's your preference, right? It's we don't care, right? It's use what's you like and what's going to work for you. But it is interesting is what brings people in, and of course what the community itself is willing to help with and not discourage people from doing, right? With the whole gaming aspect is what's your point. Because I'm with you, right? I would rather have a little bit of sugar out there that bring people in, and then they realize later, oh, you know what? I sit at a computer all day at work. This is the same kind of thing. I can do a lot of this stuff for my work stuff, which is, excellent. Which is, I know for you and I, it's the main, we might do a little game here or there or something, but it's not that's not our bulk of how we're using AHK.
No, and I know, at least from doing these Google search trends, that at some point, some years back, AutoHotkey, at least for some period of time, overtook AutoIt in that trend. And that's not the same as saying how many are really using it or anything like that. But we, at least, for a long period of time, I've kind of did some statistics from outside of really having access to the server or anything like that. Just watching, doing small statistics on how many new users has been created today, how many new posts has been created by new users in the last week and stuff like that. And it really was kind of consistent that we had like 20 new users and 8 new posts by new users each and every day. So it felt like the AutoHotkey community kept growing from day and day in and day out and stuff like that. And maybe half of that at times were game-related questions. And some of it was very, very simple stuff. And a lot of it was asking for the most simplest of scripts. Like, I want to click F5 every 30 seconds and then move the mouse. So clear game type automation. But people were helpful and kept providing similar answers over and over and over, which to me also kind of meant that when people searched for it in Google, AutoHotkey had the freshest topic on those issues that people were looking for. And I do believe that it's a fine way of getting people to come in. And again, I'm not that much against game automation. I do not feel like people should cheat at competitive games in the aspect of where you're really competing against other people. But if it's just a matter of a game stealing people's time and money for that matter, to me, you're allowed to automate it. Just as you're allowed to automate your work, other tedious tasks, because it's a game. It's supposed to be fun in your free time, not a time-consuming task that takes up whatever amount of your free time. So to me, game automation is just as allowed as any other type of automation in a work situation. It's not a matter of you automating like a gamble or poker game or shoot 'em ups where people are competing for whatever prize money and stuff like that. Right. That's not what I'm saying. But if it's just, I don't know, some kind of farm will where you need to log in each and every hour to collect your coins and click a button and move a thing and then log out again, or you need to stay in game for an hour just moving around a map or whatever it might be, I'm not seeing the issue. I really am not. And I don't ever think that anybody can convince me of that being an issue.
Yeah.
Because it's people saving the only resource that really matters.
It's awesome. Great way to put
their time. To me, that's that's what it is.
I did, while you were chatting, I had a couple ideas. So I looked up the oh no, hold on a second. Where's my mute? There we go. I looked up on the Alexa.com, so because my Echo would have got off on this, but you know, that's the ranking, right? So and lower is better, right? So a lower number is the more popular site. So AutoHotkey.com is ranked 15,377. Let me make sure that's the, yeah. And then the AutoIt script, I think it's what the main one was. I looked it up, but I think that's what it was. I'm going from memory. Was 55,399. So AutoHotkey is 15,377. AutoIt's 55,399. So it seems like AutoHotkey is more popular now. Interesting enough, because I have it right here. Both of them, AutoHotkey says the average amount of time spent on it is 5 minutes and 30 seconds, and the AutoIt is 5 minutes and 2 seconds. So it's interesting; those are both fairly close to each other. And then I also did. This is what I think is also interesting, because I think you'll totally agree with this, Jackie. Is on LinkedIn. When I searched for AutoHotkey and I looked for people, there were 4,733 people who have AutoHotkey somewhere in their profile, right? Mm-hmm. And if you search for AutoIt, there's 18,790. And I think that gets back to, which is your point earlier, right? Is AutoIt is a more accepted as a programming language. And so people think about it for work. And so they've actually put it into their, their profile that they're doing it. Right. I think it's a good point, because I think AutoHotkey's gotten more popular, yet among business people, AutoIt it still shows stronger.
Yeah, and it also relates to these things with the stronger typed language, and maybe more stuff being included. And when you adopt it as a company or whatever, more of it is included in the closed source. Mm-hmm. They have a tendency to include more functionality, so you don't need to use different types of ways to do del calls or whatever, graphic rendering, or I don't remember it all, but it's the same with COM and stuff like that. They have more functions written into the source code.
Yeah.
And fair enough. And that also means that when you choose AutoHotkey as a company, you have a better idea of what you're allowing for. And how to use it, how to teach it, and stuff like that. And knowing that everybody isn't getting different types of noob-like code from the internet to do the same thing. So I do see some of the appeal there.
Yeah, I'll agree. Especially, I think you maybe nailed it. I'd say for web scraping, for COM with, let's say, especially Excel, but maybe even Outlook, Word, I think you could go there, right? You could have a little library for that. Those would be the three things. If we had a standard library, that everyone says this is what you use for these things, and API calls, but that, of course, everyone you'd have to develop the OAuth stuff differently, right? But you could have a core kind of, some values there. Like I wrote my little syntax writer, but anyway, yeah, that would be very helpful to, I think, help people get them going and give them direction of how you can actually use it, right? Of hey, it's built in there.
Yeah, and I think that I don't have a real insight into the developer side of both AutoHotkey or AutoIt for that matter, but I think the developer team size has been a bit larger on the AutoHotkey or AutoIt side for a few years. Mm-hmm. And because of this higher amount of people with a bit more code skill, because either they're working in an environment with more programmers or they themselves have some kind of programming knowledge when they start, or they're working their way there. Where with AutoHotkey, because games and people move into other programming languages and stuff, because they start out from scratch. To me, I think that AutoIt has more advanced functionality, both built into the source, but also a more defined or maybe an older library that more people have been inclined to use because it was made almost not professionally, that's maybe not the correct term, but because it's a strictly written language, there's not that much to interpret. So if someone has made a library, they've most likely made it the only way that it could be made. Mm-hmm. There's not much to come for.
Okay.
So you don't have someone doing a new library for that functionality in a few months because you'll literally be writing the same code. Yeah. I'm of course guessing a bit because I don't have enough insight to know if that really is the case, but from just looking, when I do a search, and sometimes when I'm looking for something more advanced, I might also search for it in AutoIt, because the code base is similar enough to make a conversion pretty straightforward. And then sometimes you hit these snags where the AutoIt source has included functionality to do memory objects or do Windows API structures. Or so over the years, they have kind of streamlined some of the more advanced functionality where you can still do it in AutoHotkey, but you first need to find someone who did it first and wrote a usable piece of code to do it again. And that's one of the issues, I think, or at least one of the differences between the two, because you could do it in AutoHotkey, but it's more loosely done. So you either need to piece it together or someone with enough knowledge had done it as a class. But the problem is there's probably another class or a bit older in a function library, or even older than that, just a subroutine that does the same. So you kind of get these harder to know off the bat what to use situations. So
but I know we've discussed this before that Python, AutoHotkey, and possibly AutoIt also have more built into it. Python, like it's so bare bones. And then when you go to, let's say, web scraping, there's so many Python web scraping library things that you can look at, and how do you know which one to use? And that's where it's funny because you start getting too many of them and it becomes overwhelming as well, right?
It kind of put me off with Python when I was trying to at least get some insight into Python, doing a few online stuff. And because you always needed to include some kind of module or someone else's library, or you should be using this library or this one. Many also like this one. Choose one of those, and all three of them do it in a slightly different way. Whereas with AutoHotkeys, as you said, there's more built into it, yes, but with COM and a few of the other more complex things, it is a pretty straightforward syntax. And you can look up how it was written on MSDN or how it was done in VBA or different types of stuff like that. And you could just copy paste it into AutoHotkey and use it that way. And to me, that is a strength.
Absolutely. Once you start, and also I know we've covered this, but I assume you can do something similar with AutoIt, with AutoHotkey in the Excel, and use the VBA recorder, right, to track what you're doing, and then look at it, and then make minor tweaks, and use it in your AutoHotkey code. Have you ever looked at AutoIt's usage of COM? Is it similar, that it's that close to what you're doing that it's easy to adapt?
I have looked into AutoHot AutoIt's way of doing it, and it is similar, but it's a good amount of years back. So I'm not gonna put my head on the block on that one because I kind of might be mixing it together with the way that AutoHotkey first implemented Calm by Sheen or Sean or whatever, which was a great functionality, but you had everything in function calls, where when it was added into the L source, and you got the dot syntax, everything kind of moved up a notch, right?
Yeah, so, it's so much easier to understand.
Yeah. And I have seen that in AutoIt code. So
the other thing, which I realized, and I tried looking, it looks like they used to have one and maybe don't anymore. But I don't, like you, I don't want to put my head in the chopping block on this. But AutoHK has the Discord as well as a thriving Reddit community where you can ask questions in the forum, of course, right? You can ask questions to these, and often, especially Discord, you have people live there almost all the time and will help you, right? And I don't think AutoIt offers that kind of community type support unless you have friends that you've known. It'd be like you and I, right? Hey, like we've been working for years together. I'm stuck on something. Would you help me? Of course, I'm sure that they have that in AutoIt, right? People that know each other. But for new people coming in, I don't think they have any type of a way like that to have someone really help you. Now, what they probably do, correct me if you think I'm wrong, they probably do have a much more structured way of finding people to pay to do the stuff, right? Given that they use it for businesses, I'm going to guess that they have more people that actually, it's okay to get paid to do stuff, where we know in AutoHotkey, some people think it's evil if you're actually charging for help, or anything.
Yeah, and that's getting back to some of the people who stay with AutoHotkey stay because of different reasons, of course, but some stay because it's open source, and some have a strong feeling that code should be open source and don't want to use stuff like AutoIt because it's closed source, and that's of course up to the individual what they want to do. But that also means that when people want to charge for code, these feelings of code needing to be open, and it's the same thing we see when people want to obscurate their code or want to protect their code or their script, where in the AutoHotkey community, you almost always are told that's not really possible. Anybody is gonna be able to break whatever kind of encryption you make. Whereas in AutoIt, you actually have multiple posts and libraries and specific functionality to make code encoding possible, and it is an accepted thing to try and do. And just those two things means that AutoIt is kind of supportive of you trying to protect your code, where AutoHotkey is kind of on. I'm not sure which way it will go if you actually ask in the AutoHotkey forum or Discord. It could go both ways, because some are of course supportive of it and others are kind of like, yeah, why bother? But yeah.
Awesome. Well, hopefully that helps some people of decide which one you want to use.
Hopefully.
All right, man. It's good talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Great job.